this video because my video on cyberpunk sex addiction was deemed inappropriate for advertisers. So it has made no money and it was one of my more popular cyberpunk videos, so I'm really sad. So I've recut it, we've taken out all of the more graphic sexual scenes. It's a cartoon. Anyways, it was relatively graphic, I guess. So that's been removed. So if you could give it a watch, that would be really appreciated. If you could share it so that other people can actually see it, because when that happens, it's actually not shown to anyone. You have to specifically look for it to find it. So here we have it, Cyberpunk Sex Addiction, which I think is educational and entertaining at the same time. You can let me know in the comments below. A lot of what we see in Night City is kind of the darker side to the cyberpunk world. There's a lot of addiction that's portrayed in this show, and a great deal of that is also sex addiction. We can become addicted to almost anything, especially things that give our brain a positive reward. For a sexual addiction, that's because when we have sex, we end up feeling this great release of oxytocin, which makes us feel good and happy, and dopamine, which makes us feel motivated and alive. And when we feel these good, happy feelings, we like to feel them more. This releases all of these reward neurons. And when you're talking about a world where there's a lot of hardship and difficulty, you can understand why people would want to lose themselves in a virtual world or through drugs or drinking just to feel something else, to feel better. Now let's add to that the fact that you can have this virtual world where you can be anything, be with anyone, and any of your fantasies can be enacted right in front of you, something that's even more salient than just watching something or reading about it. And you might think that there's nothing really wrong with that because there's a lack of consequences, but sometimes there are consequences, because whenever you're addicted to something, well then everything else pales in comparison. You can sometimes then end up being caught up in your addiction, and then you end up losing sight of your real world tasks and obligations. You end up becoming late for things, and they're not as enjoyable because you're used to your addiction. And the problem with addiction is that it ends up having this threshold. Every time that you reach that threshold, it's not the same amount of a high, and so you have to do more and more extreme things to get the same amount of gratification, which can lead to extreme behaviors or extreme wants. And it can kind of grip you where you're constantly chasing this dragon that's impossible to catch.
Christ, the hell, who is that? Ah, David, hey.
How do you know that you're actually even addicted to something versus you just really enjoy it? One is that you can't stop. You try to curb the behavior and you're not able to. The next one is that you're losing sight of your day or your tasks or the things that you want to accomplish because all you're doing and thinking about is this one thing that you're addicted to. A lot of people think things like sex addiction are linked to the fact of not having enough emotional control, or that you're not a strong enough person, but let's be honest, any of us can become addicted to something. It's just innate to our nature of humanity. Our brains are made to enjoy things that feel good and want to avoid things that feel bad, especially in a place like Night City, where it also seems to be linked with this lack of humanity, that people are losing sight of the things that are important. They're on the street, they're destitute. You can really understand why people will try to grab any moments of happiness that they can have.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Another consequence of sex addiction is that for a lot of people, they lose the ability to be intimate in real life situations because they're so caught up in this fantasy or virtual world or the things that they're looking at that they can no longer make that same connection in real life situations because of that effect of needing more and more extreme situations in order to feel the same amount of pleasure. I think that a lot of times sex addiction is given this kind of, ooh, it's so bad and nefarious and only horrible people could be addicted to sex. All of us can be addicted to all kinds of different things, and it's just so easy to be caught up when you enjoy something to do it more and more until it kind of catches hold of that reward loop in your brain. And it can be really difficult in order to be able to ramp yourself down by slowly weaning yourself off of those things so that less and less extreme things can still give you pleasure. But if you're having a really hard time dealing with an addiction, sometimes it's better to go see a specialist about dealing with it than just dealing with it alone. If you want to know about how strong addiction can hold on to your brain, rats will actually take a hit of dopamine to the brain and won't eat and drink and will just continue to live off of that dopamine until they die of starvation and dehydration. So it's pretty powerful.
Already made it this far. Ain't no way I'm gonna start downgrading. Not now. Can't stop running.
Sex addiction is not the only addiction that Cyberpunk deals with. It also deals with that addiction to cyberware, which I think is also really understandable to us. To be able to have this power, who wouldn't want to be signed up, to be stronger, to be powerful, especially in this world where there's a huge divergence from the people that have power and the people that do not, and that this can make the difference, where you no longer feel yourself as being helpless at the whims of everyone around you, where you can actually have control, power, money, and freedom.
I'm doing just fine, Doc. It's like I feel better in metal than in my own skin.
Well, your affinity for cyberware is nuts, I'll grant you that.
And that's the thing, is that often, especially at the beginning of an addiction, it just feels good. And we often lie to ourselves that, you know what, I'm going to be different. This isn't going to affect me like it affects everyone else. We have this feeling of self-importance that we don't fit into the usual algorithm, that we're smarter than that. The unfortunate thing is that actually we usually fall into the same statistics as everyone else. We like to think of ourselves as an individual and unique and better than the means, but most people think that they're better than the mean.
Lot of other peeps would have cracked by now.
Believe yourself to be special?
Must just be special, I guess.
We're also really adept at lying to ourselves, at making up defenses and protections so that we can end up doing what we already want to do. And that leads us into the trap of getting closer and closer to that event horizon that we can't get ourselves out of.
And give me my
David! By the time that we're so deep into it where it's now becoming a detriment and everyone's trying to reach out to us and telling us to stop, at that point where we're at this level where it's violent and we need this and it matters more than anything else in our life, that we can't stop even if we'll lose the things that we care about most, because that addiction is the thing that we actually want more than anything else. That's definitely one of those huge red flags that you should go and seek out help, that it's beyond your ability to control. But for a lot of us, that's also a really hard thing to admit, that we are not able to deal with this. For a lot of people, especially those that lean more towards being a type A personality, perfectionist, achievement-oriented, good at everything they do, the top of the field, to be able to reach out and ask for help can often be harder and more difficult than just deciding that I'm just going to let everything go to ruin. And that choice of being able to have that courage to take those first steps to be able to get help can be really painful, because we have to end up confronting all of those lies that means that I wasn't special and that this could take hold of me and I wasn't able to stop it on my own. But in the end, that's what an addiction is. And it doesn't make you weak or not good enough or not smart enough to get caught up in an addiction. It really can happen to any of us. And most of us are addicted to something. It could be sugar or caffeine or video games or the amount of time on social media. They don't have to be these huge, big ones like gambling or sex or power or money. It can also be little small things in our lives that we can sometimes not notice.
Really think you're special?
Handled the Sandy, didn't I?
So you have a higher tolerance than everyone else, that's all. Doesn't mean you're not human, you know.
And I think that people hate that. They hate having to confront their limitations. They even hate hearing that they have limitations and that addictions can be in many different forms. Even emotions can be addictive. You can be addicted to being angry or being sad or being really anxious. The more that you do something, it can feel right, even though it feels all levels of wrong.
I killed someone. Reminded me of my mom. Woman had a son too. About my age.
For David also, this is a sign of his loss of humanity, which is one of these undercurrent themes in cyberpunk, that often all of this link to tech and power and addiction loses our sense of who we are, that empathy, that care, which can then lead us to a greater chance of cyberpsychosis. And that's what happens sometimes when you become so addicted to something. You forget everything around you because your brain becomes so strongly linked to that addiction that it doesn't fire the same amount for other feelings and emotions, even empathy or love. It can become really detrimental to all the relationships around you.
Gotta get us out of this mess.
Are you what? You don't even have the slightest idea how the mystery chrome works or what it can do to you!
Don't see any other options. Do you?
Cyberpunk really shows us that difference in the dark and the light side of humanity, how wonderful and caring and self-sacrificing it can be, but also these dark addictions, these needs, and where they can lead us. I think that all of these grim reminders of how power can corrupt and the need to have things can end up being at the loss of everything that you care about. If you like this video, you can also check out my Last of Us Show Season 1 compilation, ad-free, sponsor-free, just like all my videos on Nebula. And that's the whole purpose of Nebula. It's a place where high-quality education creators can post early, post extended versions, post videos that would never be able to be made on YouTube. Creators like Legal Eagle, Nando V Movies, Alt-Shift-X, Medlife Crisis, and so many more. I've been posting my compilation videos like Arcane, The Jinx Saga, Vox Machina Season 1, Wednesday Season 1, and of course The Last of Us early on Nebula. And I also have a whole course on how to beat anxiety on Nebula classes. You can also get exclusive originals like how they adapted Lord of the Rings, The Time When, and so many more. Again, only on Nebula. All ad-free, sponsor-free, and if you sign up using my exclusive link below, which you totally should, you can get Nebula for just $3 a month or $40 a year, and clicking on that link really does help out this channel. Oh, and you hate yearly or monthly subscriptions? You can just do it all in one fell swoop for a lifetime membership for only $300. And it's all early access, all the extended versions, the originals, all from Nebula creators, just by clicking on the link below. Also, clicking on that link helps us be able to make more premium content. So thank you so much for your support, and thank you for Nebula. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Let me know about your thoughts on addiction and the way that Cyberpunk deals with it in the comments below, and hopefully you'll check out my next video.